660 gallons of water being dropped on the Palisades fire in Southern California. The last fire in this area 75 years ago. So many in that area worrying what fire season this year might bring. The Biden administration says they're already preparing for it. The deadly conflict between Israel and Hamas enters its second week. Innocent lives lost on both sides. Our team forced to jump into a ditch under threat of rocket attack as Israel unleashes on Hamas. We speak to a spokesman for the terror organization tonight. What will it take for them to stop firing at Israel? Back to life. States like New York announced they are lifting their mask mandate. California says you need to wear masks until mid-June. The largest nurses union in the U.S. pushes back on the CDC mask guidance with confusion remaining from coast to coast. Cooperating with the feds, Congressman Matt Gaetz' former associate Joel Greenberg pleads guilty to federal charges, including sex trafficking of a minor, without naming names, saying others were involved. The Florida lawmaker denies any wrongdoing. We break down the legal challenges he may face.
So you're about $6,000 behind on rent right now. How does that feel?
It doesn't feel good. I mean, I'll be real, it doesn't feel good.
So much at stake with a judge set to decide the fate of the eviction moratorium. Advocates say the eviction ban has been critical. Should the government be doing even more? Forced to step down? The new report raising questions about why billionaire Bill Gates resigned from the board of Microsoft. Was it because of an inappropriate relationship with a staffer? And the future of medicine. The pandemic forced us to adapt. We saw the marvels of science firsthand with those life-saving vaccines. So now we ask what other medical miracles might be on the horizon. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. After days of relative silence, President Biden is now speaking out about the escalation of violence in the Middle East, saying that he supports a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The conflict there has now entered into its second week. Israel once again unleashed on Gaza, targeting Hamas tunnels in an effort to root out senior leadership. But as we have seen time and time again, so often it's the young and the innocent who are caught right in the middle. We watched images today of first responders in Gaza combing through the rubble for survivors. Meanwhile, in Israel, a rocket destroyed this home. The residents inside were able to get to shelter with just seconds to spare. With the eyes of the world once again on this region, many are asking, what will it take to finally end this conflict in both the short and long term? Matt Gutman leads us off on the ground in Israel.
Tonight, Israel unleashing a ferocious aerial assault, saying it targeted Hamas tunnels in the Gaza Strip. A top commander of the group Islamic Jihad killed in this blast. And these terrified children cowering in fear as bombs exploded nearby. In its second week, the latest spasm of violence escalating with unexpected speed. The U.S. now facing growing pressure to call for an immediate ceasefire. Today's bombardment coming less than 24 hours after Israel's single deadliest strike on Gaza. Buildings flattened, 42 killed, including children. The hospitals in Gaza stretched to the limit. They were already struggling to cope with COVID. Now they're treating the wounded. Today, some ambulances taking the injured into Egypt for medical care. And on the ground in Gaza, rescuers using their bare hands, clawing at the debris of collapsed buildings. This little girl, encrusted with blood and dust, pulled out alive, carried in rescuers' arms to an ambulance. And beside one of those debris piles was Mohammed Hadidi, wailing in anguish. He said his wife and 5 sons were visiting family at this home when the bombs came. An hour later, in a haze of grief, he was led into this hospital, and there a little miracle awaited. His son Omar, the father tenderly kissing his son, little Omar clutching his father's finger. So far, more than 200 Palestinians killed, nearly half women and children, and more than 1,400 wounded. On the Israeli side, 10 killed and 300 wounded. In Gaza, officials say 7,000 buildings have been damaged or destroyed, leaving nearly 40,000 people homeless. Gaza's infrastructure taking a hard hit. Its electric company saying the region could run out of power in a matter of days.
Because of the airstrikes conducted by Israel in our region, all municipal services are interrupted. Electricity, water, network and telecommunications are cut off. I have no idea when these essential municipal services will be restored.
And tonight, Israel also facing international condemnation for this attack, which leveled a building housing the Associated Press and Al Jazeera. Reporters seen rummaging through the rubble, trying to salvage what they could. Israel says Hamas was operating there, claiming it shared the intel with the U.S. But when Secretary of State Blinken was asked about that today,
I've not seen any information provided.
President Biden, whose administration says it's relying on quiet diplomacy, today calling Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu, saying for the first time publicly he supports a ceasefire. The Israeli military says Hamas has fired more than 3,300 rockets at Israel so far. Today, we were right beneath one of those barrages.
We just got out of our car. We're lying in a ditch here by the side of the road. You can see the Israeli soldier over there. Everybody in that checkpoint behind us also disappearing, trying to hide for cover. There's what seems to have been an interception overhead. You can hear the booms in Gaza. Right over there. And the sirens.
Israel keeping thousands of reservists on standby in preparation for a possible ground invasion. The southern city of Ashkelon targeted more than any other. A synagogue badly damaged over the weekend from Hamas rocket fire.
Jillian, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And just a couple of blocks away is where we met Jillian Daniel 9 years ago. Her family hurrying to that bomb shelter. Today, we paid her another visit. 9 years ago, we were sitting right here.
Yeah.
And there were sirens, the rockets came raining down. Has anything changed?
No.
She suggests no progress at all in the past nearly decade. In a moment, we'll speak with a senior member of Hamas. Throughout this deadly conflict, each night we are seeking out voices on both sides. But first, Matt Gutman joins us once again. Matt, we learned that President Biden's expressing, quote, support for a ceasefire to end the conflict. How is the role of the U.S. being perceived there on the ground?
In Israel, at least, the U.S. role is paramount. And the perception is that once the United States actually gives something that sounds like an order to enter into a ceasefire, Israel will likely do it within a matter of at least a couple of days. But that hasn't quite happened. What we're seeing right now is President Biden, for the first time, expressing support for a ceasefire, which doesn't tell us that there's actually a ceasefire on the table. We don't know what the plan is. We don't know whether Egypt and Qatar and other countries are playing a role and what the actual parameters of a ceasefire might be, which leads the sources with whom I'm speaking here to say that at least for the next 48 hours or so, this conflict is likely to continue. One quick note, we were expecting a significant rocket barrage from Gaza tonight. Islamic Jihad said that it would target Tel Aviv because of the assassination of one of its leaders. Hasn't happened. Maybe that's a good sign. Lindsay.
Yeah, sounds peaceful, at least for the moment. And also, Matt, Israel is not allowing journalists or aid groups to enter Gaza at this time. Walk us through how challenging that makes it to get at the truth of what's going on.
We're hearing that Israel might start to allow a little bit of aid through over the next couple of days, but the main crossing into Gaza, that's the Erez crossing point, remains closed, as you mentioned, to aid groups and to journalists. And as the AP president and CEO recently said, the fact that their building was destroyed and the fact that they're not allowing foreign press in makes it harder to know what's really going on the ground. And we have requested to go in. We have asked multiple sources why this is, why they don't let us in. We have not received satisfactory answers, but obviously it makes reporting on the ground that much more difficult. That said, we have had a longtime producer on the ground in Gaza. His name is Sammy. He's done wonderful work and helped us out. But there's a different feel when you're actually reporting on the ground and you have your correspondent and reporter there just telling people stories. We have not had the opportunity to do that. Lindsay.
Okay. All right. Matt Gutman, our thanks to you once again. Joining us now is Dr. Bassem Naim, head of international relations for Hamas. Dr. Naim, appreciate your time. Thank you so much for talking with us tonight. Health officials in Gaza say that critical blood supplies may run out by tomorrow. Power, which is only running 3 to 4 hours a day, could be down to 0 by week's end. What will it take at this point for Hamas to stop firing rockets at Israel?
Thank you very much. First of all, I have to say that the situation now is very serious and you can hear bombardment everywhere. No one is safe and no one is secure anywhere at any time. I think we hope that we were able to stop this escalation from the day one, because we have flexibly and cooperatively with all brokers, the UN, the Egyptians, and the Qataris, and told them that about our readiness to stop the escalation if the Israelis stop their aggression against our people and stop their plans to forceful eviction, which is against international law, from Sheikh Jarrah, and stop to change the status quo in Al-Aqsa compound.
But to the degree that Hamas fired first, do you feel that there's any responsibility for Hamas to stop firing at this point?
Unfortunately, the international media usually choose to read the story from chapter 10, and there are 9 chapters before. The story started when the Israelis, for their unfortunate, started to play with fire by changing the status quo, by attacking the peaceful worshippers in Al-Aqsa compound, by forceful eviction of Palestinian families from Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. Therefore, and during a month long, we have tried to contact all the UN, the international community, Arab and Islamic countries, to call them to intervene, to stop the forceful eviction of Palestinians and to stop attacking the peaceful worshippers in the mosque. And despite all of these calls, nothing have done any serious actions to stop these plans. Therefore, it was a response against the violation of our rights, against the attacks of the Israelis towards our people and towards our holy places.
So are you prepared at all in the possibility of engaging in a ceasefire?
Immediately, if the Israelis stop their aggression against our people here in Gaza, and rational guarantees from the international community that the plans to evict Palestinians forcefully from Sheikh Jarrah and to change the status quo in Al-Aqsa compound will be stopped immediately.
The U.S. designates Hamas as a terrorist organization with ties to Iran, but your organization has also won elections in Gaza. So the question is Hamas in control of its military wing, or is it Iran?
Iran has nothing here to do, by the way. First of all, Hamas is a big bloc representing around 40% of the Palestinian people. It was elected in the most fairful and transparent, free elections in 2006, and the international community, mainly the United States, have rejected the results of this election.
So at this point, it looks like, at least from our perspective, Hamas shoots locally made rockets in Gaza toward Israel. Israel then responds. Innocent Palestinians' lives are lost in the process. Would you say that the bloodshed that we're seeing is worth it from your perspective?
By the way, we are not planning, we are not working on any escalations, and the international community represented by the UN know very well that Hamas worked hardly and cooperatively with the international community to contain the situation on the ground and to prevent any escalations, and this was successful for years. But when the Israelis trying to attack the Palestinian holy places in the holiest month, which is Ramadan, and attacking forcefully to forceful eviction of Palestinians from their houses where they have lived for decades in Sheikh Jarrah, they have initiated the escalation. They have created the ideal grounds for this explosion. Look, what Israel is doing today, for example, to kill more than 200 Palestinians, including 59 children and 30 women, to destroy houses above the heads of their owners at 1 or 2 p.m. at night while the people are sleeping. What is the military target in these houses?
Your son was killed by the Israeli army in a previous conflict. The world is watching Palestinians lose their lives in horror. As you just mentioned, more than 200 dead, 59 of them children, 1,400 injured at this point. When do you decide that it's time to reevaluate your strategy?
We have already reevaluated our strategy, and in September 2020, we have issued with all Palestinian factions a document to say we are accepting a state in 67 borders with Jerusalem as a capital, with preserving the right of return for refugees. But the response from the Israelis and from the international community, mainly the U.S., was rejection.
The U.S. White House envoy was in Ramallah today meeting with Palestinians. Did the U.S. administration also reach out to Hamas or have other countries in an effort to stop this crisis? I think they are in contact with different brokers, the UN, the Qataris and the Egyptians, and maybe the PA in Ramallah. And we can say they are in indirect contact with us through these brokers. Again, we emphasize our point that we are ready for calm and to cease the escalation immediately if this aggression against our people stop. Dr. Naheem, we thank you so much for your time.
Please.
And now to the confusion. Days after the CDC issued new guidance on masks, saying fully vaccinated people can go without them indoors and outdoors with some exceptions. New York on Wednesday will become the latest state to ease mask-wearing guidelines for the vaccinated, but Americans now find themselves facing a patchwork of different rules and regulations as questions remain for businesses on exactly how they'll track who should and shouldn't be wearing a mask. ABC's Stephanie Ramos has the latest.
In a major move toward reopening, New York State today announcing it will adopt those new CDC guidelines and lift its indoor and outdoor mask rules for vaccinated people.
If you are vaccinated, you are safe. No masks, no social distancing.
Starting Wednesday, when capacity limits are lifted, fully vaccinated New Yorkers and visitors can ditch their masks in most places, except healthcare settings, schools, and on public transportation.
I'm thinking, do all these people really have their vaccines? I don't feel comfortable.
So I guess you guys will continue to keep your mask on?
No question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It comes as Americans across the country are scrambling to keep up with a confusing new patchwork of rules changing by the day. Retailers say if they drop mask rules, they would have to take customers at their word.
It puts small businesses in the place of having to police people all over again, and you can't tell by looking at somebody that they've been vaccinated.
This bar in Louisville, Kentucky, asking customers for proof of vaccination.
We just would feel a little more comfortable if you're willing to prove that you're vaccinated.
Chains like Starbucks, Walmart, Trader Joe's, and Costco dropping their mask rules, but only in states without mask mandates. Tonight, 23 still have some statewide mask rules. Our Kana Whitworth outside LA, where there's still a mask rule through June 15th.
You feel, though, that the guidelines are not really clear in California as to what's expected.
They're totally confusing. Everybody's confused and everybody's afraid.
And tonight, essential workers and the largest nurses union argue dropping masks indoors could put them and other vulnerable people at risk. Susan Hernandez, who works at a supermarket, has had COVID and fears being exposed again, even though she's been vaccinated.
I'm going to continue to wear my mask, because I don't want to bring something home to my father who has cancer.
The CDC says after vaccination, the risk of spreading the virus is low.
Stephanie Ramos joins us now. Stephanie, we heard those concerns from some businesses, and this change on mask guidance is also raising concerns for families with young children who can't yet get a vaccine.
Exactly, Lindsay. And so many families that I've spoken to say that they're still concerned because even though those parents may be vaccinated, they don't know once they're walking into a business if everyone in there is vaccinated. So one mom who was walking down this street with her son just a little while ago, I spoke to her and she said they just don't know enough about the virus. And again, they don't know who's vaccinated and who's not. So the masks on her kids will stay on. Lindsay.
Yeah, the droplet anxiety continues for many parents. And we've also seen cities and states get creative on incentives to spur more vaccinations. Ohio even starting a $1 million raffle. Is that working?
Exactly. Well, the governor of Ohio says it is working. He says that since they announced the Vaccination incentives and opened up eligibility to teens and kids 12 to 15 years old last week, that they've heard from local health departments and pharmacies saying that a lot more people are signing up to get vaccinated. So I guess it's working. We'll just have to wait and see.
The Vaccination challenge. All right. Stephanie Ramos, our thanks to you. And now to a guilty plea that could spell trouble for Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz. Joel Greenberg, a one-time close ally of Gaetz, has agreed to cooperate with investigators and pleaded guilty to multiple federal crimes, including sex trafficking of a minor. Greenberg admitted that he paid at least one underage girl for sex and introduced her to other men who did the same. ABC's congressional correspondent Rachel Scott has the latest.
Tonight, this banner flying over the federal courthouse in Orlando. TikTok Matt Gaetz. Inside, the congressman's former friend Joel Greenberg pleading guilty to 6 federal crimes, including sex trafficking of a minor, admitting he paid a 17-year-old girl for sex. In his plea deal, Greenberg, a tax collector, claims he introduced the minor to other adult men who engaged in commercial sex acts. Today, reporters asked his lawyer if Congressman Gaetz is one of those men.
Does my client have information that could hurt an elected official? I guess this is just, must-see television. You'll just have to wait and see.
Greenberg has pledged to cooperate fully with investigators who have been looking into whether he and Gaetz offered gifts in cash in exchange for sex.
I'm being falsely accused of exchanging money for naughty favors.
The congressman, a close ally of former President Donald Trump, denies he engaged in any illegal conduct. He insists he's being framed by political opponents, saying someone is trying to recategorize my generosity to ex-girlfriends as something more untoward. Gaetz says no way he is resigning.
I'm a canceled man in some corners of the internet. I might be a wanted man by the deep state, but I am a Florida man, and it is good to be home.
Congressman Gaetz kind of making light of his situation there. Rachel Scott joins us now. Rachel, what's his team saying, and has there been any reaction at all from congressional Republicans to this investigation into these very serious charges?
Republicans are largely staying silent on this. You have few that are rushing to the defense of Congressman Matt Gaetz, and only one has called for him to resign. Leader Kevin McCarthy has said he's going to wait to see if these allegations are true before he strips him of any committee assignments. But that is a very stark contrast, Democrats say, to what just played out with Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who was just kicked out of GOP leadership for simply just speaking out repeatedly against former President Donald Trump. And as for Congressman Matt Gaetz, well, his team tonight, they are trying to create some distance between Gaetz and Joel Greenberg. They point out that in the courtroom today, Greenberg admitted to actually falsely accusing a totally different man of having sex with a minor. They continue to insist that he is an innocent man, Lindsay.
Rachel Scott, our thanks to you. And for more now on the potential fallout for Congressman Matt Gaetz, we bring in Robert Mintz, a former federal prosecutor, now with the law firm McCarter and English. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, Mr. Mintz. Now, Joel Greenberg hasn't named Congressman Gaetz, at least not publicly. But still, should Gaetz be worried about this guilty plea?
Well, you're right. He's not been named in the plea agreement. He wasn't named in open court, but that's the usual course here. You should be worried about potentially getting involved in a federal criminal case if you are in any way involved with any of the activities that were the subject of charges that somebody just pled guilty to here. So only Congressman Gaetz really knows how much jeopardy he may be in, but it certainly seems, based upon his reported conduct and his close relationship with Mr. Greenberg, that he should be a bit concerned.
And this investigation seems to be in an early phase at this point. What do you think investigators and prosecutors are looking most closely at right now?
Well, they're trying to build this case out. They've undoubtedly spent hours already with Mr. Greenberg. These plea deals are not signed overnight. They're only signed after prosecutors have already determined that they believe that a witness can provide valuable cooperation. And by that, I mean that that witness can lead to charges against other individuals. And we know that there are other individuals involved because in open court today, Mr. Greenberg spoke about others who were involved in having illicit sex with underage women, underage girls. We don't know who those people are. It may involve Congressman Gaetz. It may involve other people, but there's certainly other people involved here.
And speaking generally, not at all specifically about this case, but when someone pleads guilty and cuts a deal with prosecutors, how much credibility does that person typically have with a judge or jury?
Well, they have a lot of credibility in the sense that they are at the center of this criminal conspiracy. They're one of the insiders, and they can speak knowledgeably about what happened. But on the other hand, any good defense lawyer is going to try to attack them aggressively, saying they're only trying to save their own skin by throwing others under the bus. And so what prosecutors have to do is corroborate that testimony with other witnesses, with documents, with tape recordings. Prosecutors will never ask a jury to convict somebody based solely on the uncorroborated testimony of a cooperating witness.
Robert Mintz, appreciate your insight and your time tonight.
My pleasure.
And when we come back, the medical emergency on the subway tracks and the officer rushing to the rescue. Our series, The Future Of, begins. Tonight, our look at how medicine has changed during the pandemic and the potential advances ahead. But up next, the fate of the eviction moratorium will soon be in the hands of a judge. Millions will be effective. We take a closer look.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir.
We have made it through another week together.
America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. It's all about you.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source. Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
The former police officer who fatally shot Dante Wright during a traffic stop in Minnesota is set to be tried by the end of the year. Kimberly Potter is facing second-degree manslaughter charges. Body camera footage showed the 26-year veteran threatened to use her taser, but fire her gun instead. The clock is ticking for millions of Americans who've gotten behind on their rent payments during the pandemic. The federal moratorium on evictions is set to expire June 30th, and it's facing new legal challenges in court. The government is now racing to allocate more than $40 billion in emergency rental assistance to those in need as landlords try to keep their businesses afloat as well. ABC's Elizabeth Schulze has this story.
You okay?
Before the pandemic, single mother of 2 Tania Rogers says she had never missed a rent payment.
What happened with your work when the pandemic hit?
So when the pandemic hit, my job was essentially cut short, and I was told that we had to stay home as the rest of, pretty much the rest of the world.
Rogers' paychecks from her job at a school in Washington, D.C. stopped coming, but the rent checks kept piling up.
February is kind of when I hit real, rock bottom, where I didn't have any money anymore, no reserves, no anything.
So you're about $6,000 behind on rent right now. How does that feel?
It doesn't feel good. I mean, I'll be real, it doesn't feel good.
With her 7-year-old and 2-year-old boys still out of school, Rogers drives for Uber Eats to try to pay the bills, bringing the kids along for the ride.
You have to get out your car to give the order to someone. My kids are in the car by themselves. I'm going to be looked at as being neglectful, and that's not right. You know, what other choices do I have? If I don't do Uber Eats, we don't have anything. You know, we don't have money. I can't get groceries and whatnot. I can't pay the rent. You know, the situation's already that I can't pay the rent.
Rogers is one of more than 8 million Americans currently behind on rent and facing the risk of eviction.
Just for comparison, it's about twice as many homeowners that lost their homes during the foreclosure crisis.
Twice as many homeowners who actually did lose their homes during the financial crisis are now facing the threat of eviction today.
That's right.
A federal moratorium on evictions has kept millions of Americans in their homes during the pandemic. It was first passed last spring as part of the CARES Act and was extended by the CDC until June 30th.
The eviction moratoriums that have been in place, that's allowed people some security, but it's also some uncertainty because it's had to be extended so many times.
Earlier this month, a federal judge ruled that the CDC had exceeded its authority and the eviction ban was unconstitutional. But after an appeal from the Biden administration, the judge said Friday the eviction freeze can temporarily stay in place.
We knew from the beginning that the moratoriums were just a Band-Aid approach to being able to protect renters during the crisis.
Advocates say the eviction ban has been critical for public health, keeping people in their homes and not forced into tight quarters during the pandemic. But it's not foolproof. Researchers at Princeton, tracking 5 states and 28 cities, found landlords have still filed for more than 337,000 evictions during the pandemic.
Her landlord refusing to comply with the CDC and state moratorium on evictions.
We had rented it to her knowing, it would be just a year rental.
By November, she was behind on rent. Her landlord filed for eviction.
It's been horrible.
Dean Hunter is an advocate for a small landlords group in Washington, D.C. He supported the moratorium at the onset, saying tenants adversely impacted by COVID should not be evicted. But he says the ongoing ban now risks putting small landlords out of business.
They're small businesses, and they should be treated as such.
Do you think people forget that some of these landlords are also taking care of their own families, that they need to pay their own bills too?
Yeah, there's a narrative that all landlords are multimillionaires and large corporations, but it's just not true. Investing in real estate is a small business, right? You own a rental property, you produce an income. It's been a great way to build generational wealth.
Hunter says the D.C. and federal governments should steer their efforts toward the more than $40 billion in federal aid passed since December for both renters and landlords. Much of the money has been slow to get to those in need.
The government, frankly, is not doing enough to get the tenants to apply. Where are the TV commercials? Where are the bus ads, right? Where are the celebrity sponsorships telling people to apply for rental assistance? There is more money available for rental assistance than there ever has been.
We're in a bit of a race against the clock now to try to get this money to renters in time to prevent their eviction by the time the federal eviction moratorium expires, potentially at the end of June.
With rent prices going up in many cities across the U.S., some argue rental assistance for both tenants and small landlords should be permanently expanded to help address homelessness and housing affordability. Census Bureau data shows the median price of rent increased nearly $200 this March compared to just 1 year earlier.
The 10 million or so renter families who were struggling so mightily to pay the rent before the pandemic and struggled to pay it during the pandemic, they will continue to struggle to pay the rent after the pandemic, unless and until Congress invests in the long-term solutions that are needed to keep the lowest income people safely and affordably housed.
Tania Rogers says she's hopeful the pandemic has created an opportunity to find those long-term solutions to keep families like hers in their homes.
I feel strong that even if the moratorium was to end in some form, fashion, or way, things will work out, and that could be just me purely walking off of faith. And I'm okay with saying that.
For ABC News, I'm Elizabeth Schulze in Washington. Our thanks to Elizabeth for that. Still ahead here on Prime, the direct challenge to Roe versus Wade is heading for the Supreme Court, and that has many abortion rights advocates alarmed. The suspect arrested for that massive wildfire burning in L.A. as concerns for a particularly potent wildfire season continue to grow. And many of us could have predicted this, the new study that says working long hours is very bad for your health. But first, our tweet of the day and the latest encouraging sign, the New York City Marathon is making a comeback.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart they did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough. You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. It's all about you.
Assault on the Capitol, the ABC News original, exclusively on Hulu, now streaming. With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir.
We have made it through another week together.
America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for overall excellence in television. ABC News, America's #1 news source.
Welcome back, everyone. Do you feel like working long hours is taking a serious toll on your health? If so, you could be right. Tonight, we take a look by the numbers at an alarming new study that links overwork to an increased risk of death from heart disease and also stroke. Working 55 or more hours a week is associated with a 35% higher risk of a stroke and a 17% higher risk of dying from heart disease compared to working 35 to 40 hours a week. That's according to new estimates by the World Health Organization and the International Labor Organization. In 2016, 398,000 people died from stroke and 347,000 from heart disease worldwide as a result of working long hours, according to the study. And just from 2000 to 2016, researchers saw a 42% increase of deadly heart disease linked to overworking. 72% of the victims were men, mostly middle-aged or older, according to the WHO. And globally, 9% of the total population works long hours, but that number has been trending upwards. And we still have lots to get to here on Prime tonight. The new allegations of inappropriate conduct against Microsoft founder Bill Gates in the wake of his divorce. And that missing tiger has been found. We'll explain how the saga ended. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
We will guide you through it all tonight. We have made it through another week together.
Big hug, Griffin.
tell all our patients how much they are loved. We hold their hands.
David, we're showing our love and support for all the ICU staff.
They're the heroes in this.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source.
This is GMA3, what you need to know. GMA3.
A third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon.
It's all about you. Lunchtime on ABC.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Today, the U.S. Supreme Court announced that it is now wading into the debate over abortion rights in this country. Later this year, the justices will take up a major case involving Mississippi's attempt to ban most abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy, the most significant challenge to Roe v. Wade in a generation. Senior Washington reporter Devin Dwyer covers the Supreme Court for us and joins us now. So, Devin, why is the court taking up this issue at this particular time?
Well, Lindsay, we're witnessing now the power of the new conservative majority on the Supreme Court with Justice Amy Coney Barrett. This will be the first abortion case that all 3 judges appointed by Donald Trump will hear. And, of course, President Trump appointed them with the express goal of overturning Roe versus Wade. You know, for years, the court has even refused to hear cases to laws like this one in Mississippi because they're plainly unconstitutional. That's what the lower courts said in this case. The Supreme Court, as you know, has consistently upheld the right that women have the right to terminate a pregnancy at before about 6 months, 24 weeks. That's that viability standard. But now the Supreme Court says that viability standard is going to be under review. That will take place sometime later this year in the fall, and it could go out the window entirely, Lindsay.
And both sides of this debate are gearing up for this. What was some of the reaction today when the decision came down?
Well, you know, Mississippi only has 1 active abortion clinic. They warned, of course, that this could mean the end of abortion rights in that state. More broadly, though, women's rights groups, abortion rights advocates said, quote, the alarm bells are ringing loudly because of this decision. The Center for Reproductive Rights, which tracks these sorts of major cases and laws around the country, says 20 states could immediately impose abortion bans if the court rules accordingly in this case. And, Lindsay, in fact, 11 of those states have what are so-called trigger laws on the books that would put a ban in place as soon as the Supreme Court ruled. So this is really a significant moment for abortion rights in this country. Abortion opponents hailed this as something a long time coming. They celebrated this decision today. More than 2,500 abortions were performed in Mississippi in 2017, 862,000. So we're talking about a lot at stake, Lindsay.
And what do we know about public opinion on abortion rights right now? And is there anything that Congress or the White House could do?
Well, most Americans, according to our polling and other public polling, support some level of abortion rights in this country. In fact, our poll, ABC News Washington Post poll last fall found 62% believe the Supreme Court should uphold Roe versus Wade. But Democrats in the House want to put this in writing. They want it in legislation. There are bills on the table. The White House, Lindsay, today came out and said President Biden supports writing abortion rights into federal law. Of course, we know that the narrow majority, the narrow political divisions in the U.S. Senate means those proposals aren't going anywhere. And so all eyes will be on the Supreme Court later this year in this major case on abortion rights. Lindsay?
Yeah, certainly, as you say, a lot at stake. Devin Dwyer, thanks so much, as always.
Thanks, Lindsay.
It may be an understatement to say that we have all lived through a year that we will certainly never forget. But the pandemic has not just changed our lives in this past calendar year. It will also have profound implications on our future, from where we work to how we interact to how we even go to school. This week, we wanted to take a look at what's in store for us in the future. And to that end, we speak to leaders in various fields about what they see on the horizon. Tonight, we begin with the future of medicine, from vaccines to doctor visits. What does it all mean for the world of medicine in the long run? Nasal swabs, PCR, rapid testing. These are just some of the words that became part of our vocabulary during the pandemic. We masked up, we social distanced, we isolated. But it wasn't enough. COVID took a devastating toll across the country. In New York, we saw freezer trucks outside of hospitals as the death toll mounted.
This reality slaps you right in the face. 437 deaths yesterday.
The healthcare system overwhelmed, stretched thin, but in the end, intact. We mourned the grimmest of milestones, nearly 600,000 American lives lost to the disease. The pandemic forced us to adapt, and medicine was, of course, part of that change.
Hi there, this is Dr. Desai, dermatologist. How are you?
With in-person visits too risky at the height of the pandemic, many doctors' offices switched over to telemedicine. And perhaps most importantly, the shots. 3 life-saving FDA-authorized vaccines have allowed us to gain back some semblance of normalcy. Both Pfizer and Moderna using revolutionary technology to create protection. Household names we hear now just about every day. It's thanks to science and medicine that we're now starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But that had us thinking, what other medical leaps lie ahead? We took that question and others directly to Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel of the University of Pennsylvania. So, Doctor, we are obviously living through a once-in-a-century pandemic. Should we expect that they're going to start coming fast and furious, or is the next pandemic likely 100 years away?
It's probably not 100 years away, and it's probably not fast and furious in that next year we're going to have another pandemic. But we should anticipate more pandemics.
Are we ready for the next pandemic?
Absolutely not. We need to learn lessons from this pandemic on spread. One of the things I've done is I've studied how 10 other countries responded for an update of my book, which country has the world's best healthcare. And one of the things, major conclusions that I draw is that countries with experience, countries that really took the lessons, actually had a better response because they weren't winging it.
You said that we're not prepared for the next pandemic. What does the government, what does the private sector need to do today? What's the priority that they need to do to get prepared?
Well, that is a long list, actually. But on the healthcare side, it's clear that the CDC did not do a great job. We didn't do a great job on the testing. We didn't do a great job on the masks.
When you look into the future, is COVID-19 something that we're going to ultimately eradicate, much like we have with polio, or is this something that will be something that we're dealing with like the seasonal flu?
I think it's going to turn out to be more like seasonal flu. When and the key number, I think, for the audience to look at is the number of deaths. When we get the mortality rate from COVID down to about 100 to 150 a day, in other words, somewhere between 36,000 and about 54,000 deaths a year, then it'll be in the flu range. People are going to go into their routine lives when we get that low. I do think one thing we have learned from this pandemic, and I hope it sticks, is that wearing masks in the winter when we're in close proximity to people actually can make a big difference in terms of spread.
A lot of people weren't really familiar with the mRNA technology, even though it was something that really kind of started in the 90s. When you talk about that kind of technology, give us a sense of what it could mean ultimately in the future as far as other vaccines or therapies with regard to cancer or HIV.
You are going to see companies and researchers proliferate vaccines for adults against a number of diseases using the mRNA platform. So I think what we can anticipate over the next few years and decade is a number of new vaccines against infectious diseases that adults experience based upon the mRNA platform. And I think that's going to be a really good thing. As you know, increasingly, certainly over your and my lifetime, we have seen a number of vaccines for adults, not for kids. And these vaccines, they make a huge difference to people's lives.
I just want to follow up on that because you made a distinction between adults and children's vaccines. And, certainly there are many parents who are going to be grappling with the idea in a few months, perhaps, of if they should give their young children as young as 5, 6, 7 years old this vaccine, knowing that there isn't as much history. What would you advise those parents?
We also don't really understand the long-term impact on children, even if they don't become as symptomatic or don't have a high risk of dying. There may be long-term consequences in terms of cognitive function or lung function that we haven't yet determined. But I would give my grandchildren this vaccine just because I think it's that lower risk, and the benefits of not experiencing coronavirus and not running the risk of something bad happening long-term is probably a benefit.
What are you most excited about when it comes to the mRNA technology?
How fast you can make vaccines. I mean, I think everyone is, startled. I think Tony Fauci used the phrase many times of a land speed record. And this really is amazing.
What are the lessons that we've learned from the pandemic, in particular when it comes to the difference between rural and urban healthcare?
We have to use more telemedicine and digital medicine to link up those rural sites with urban centers where there are a lot of specialists and experts that can attend to particular needs. And in urban areas, one of the things we've learned is we can deliver care to people who are staying at home really effectively. And so we don't have to bring them into hospitals or into physician offices. Telemedicine and remote monitoring work really well. I think we're going to have to rejigger our payment system so that doctors still use them and can get paid to deliver care that way.
But you think more people are going to start zooming in to see their doctor than trudging all the way to the office?
Yes. If I had suggested that 3 years ago, people would have said, "Are you kidding me?" COVID forced it, and I think a lot of people prefer it. You'd rather be in your house where you know everything, it's familiar to get your chemotherapy than to be in a large institutional setting that, you don't control the environment.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel. And before we go tonight, our images of the day. Rainbow colors from Europe to Asia to Central America on this International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia, acknowledged around the world. A reminder that while some progress has been made as far as true equality, it may be a matter that we are still miles to go before we sleep. And that is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us.
President Biden spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu this afternoon about the escalating violence in the Middle East. Israel now says its airstrikes destroyed 9 miles of tunnels used by Hamas, along with the homes of alleged Hamas commanders. Hamas and the Israeli army have been exchanging a barrage of airstrikes for a week now, with Palestinian civilians suffering the heaviest losses. Gaza is reporting extensive damage to roads and infrastructure. Gaza also experiencing widespread power outages and its tap water now undrinkable.
In New York City, 2 transit officers are being hailed as heroes for rescuing a man who fell onto the subway tracks as a train was coming into the station.
Police believe the man had a medical episode before falling off the platform. One got the incoming train to stop, while the other revived the man on the tracks. They pulled him up onto the platform, avoiding any further harm. Police making an arrest in connection with a suspicious wildfire burning in Southern California. Officials say the suspect is being treated for smoke inhalation. The fire scorched more than 1,300 acres locally. No one has been killed and no structures have been damaged. About 540 firefighters, though, battled the flames along with water-dropping helicopters in Pacific Palisades. An evacuation order affecting about 1,000 residents is still in place. The exact cause of that fire under investigation.
Microsoft founder Bill Gates facing allegations of inappropriate conduct as he and soon-to-be ex-wife Melinda French Gates finalized their multi-billion-dollar divorce. The New York Times and Wall Street Journal reporting Bill Gates allegedly pursued relationships with several employees prior to his wife of 27 years filing for divorce. According to the Journal, Bill reportedly engaged in a years-long sexual relationship with a Microsoft engineer that began in 2000. The employee writing a letter about it, which came to the board's attention in 2019, leading to an investigation. Gates effectively forced from his role on the board in March 2020. A Gates spokesperson telling the Journal there was an affair almost 20 years ago which ended amicably, and Bill's decision to transition off the board was in no way related to this matter. Also under scrutiny, Bill's relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The Daily Beast reporting Epstein allegedly gave Bill advice on ending his marriage when they met between 2011 to 2014. A spokesperson for Mr. Gates telling the Daily Beast the characterization of those meetings is inaccurate, and any claim that Gates spoke of his marriage or Melinda in a disparaging manner is false.
After a week-long search, India the tiger now safe at the 1,400-acre Cleveland Amory Black Beauty Ranch in North Texas.
Our goal is to provide him the best quality of life for the rest of his life.
India was surrendered Saturday night by Victor Cuevas' wife after police received a tip.
We got him. He's healthy.
Cuevas was the person last seen with the tiger 1 week ago in Houston, where pet tigers are illegal.
It's someone's pet.
Authorities also say Cuevas is India's owner, even though his lawyer has denied he is. He's now behind bars on a separate 2017 murder charge, which he has pled not guilty to.
No more thank you next. Ariana Grande is married. The superstar singer tied the knot with her fiancé, real estate agent Dalton Gomez. A rep for Grande confirmed to ABC News. People magazine's reporting that the ceremony at her Montecito home was tiny and intimate, with less than 20 people. It's unclear whether this was an official ceremony. Back in April, Grande shared her engagement ring on social media. The pair have kept their relationship fairly private. Grande was previously engaged to SNL star Pete Davidson before breaking it off in 2018.
And coming up in the next hour, we're staying on top of several things. The deadly crisis between Israel and Hamas continues to escalate. We bring you the latest from the region. And former NBA star Lamar Odom opens up about the treatment he credits for keeping him sober.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart they did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
When we started together as assistants, I had no idea that you guys would also become my very best friends.
A toast to long and prosperous careers.
I am not the future of Scarlett. You are.
I would never have gotten this far without you. We got you.
Always and forever.
The Bold Type premieres May 26th on Freeform and next day on Hulu.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown Hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. We are monitoring several developments here at ABC News at this hour. Continued bloodshed in the battle between Israel and Hamas. The IDF striking the homes of 5 Hamas commanders. More than 200 people have died in Gaza and more than 38,000 displaced. Today, Benjamin Netanyahu said, quote, the directive is to continue striking at the terrorist targets. President Biden has said he is in support of a ceasefire. Joel Greenberger, a one-time close ally of Florida Representative Matt Gaetz, has pled guilty to multiple federal crimes, including sex trafficking of a minor. Greenberger admitted to paying a 17-year-old. He has also agreed to cooperate with federal investigators. Kim Potter, the officer charged in the death of Dante Wright, appeared in court today. Potter is charged with second-degree manslaughter after she shot 20-year-old Dante Wright during a traffic stop. The judge set a tentative trial start date for December 6th. And now to the latest on the coronavirus pandemic. A number of states now easing restrictions as COVID-19 cases go down across much of the country. But there's still some confusion when it comes to mask wearing. Businesses, employers, and local governments all setting their own policies at this point after the CDC announced fully vaccinated people can go maskless in most cases. ABC's Rena Roy has the latest on that.
A long-awaited return to normalcy as states like New York and Massachusetts plan to drop mask mandates and reopen some places at full capacity.
We have to reopen. We have to reopen smart. We have to reopen with a cautious eye. But we have to get back to life.
Major steps forward after that new CDC guidance announced last week saying fully vaccinated people can ditch their masks in most cases.
It's nice for people to be able to be outside and breathe free air. I think everybody's been dying for that. And I think it's time that it happened.
COVID-19 numbers are going down across much of the country. The Northeast seeing a 67% drop in daily cases. And Sunday, Texas reported 0 COVID deaths.
See the results in people's lives and in their livelihoods. Deaths are down from COVID by 81%.
But many are left scratching their heads with different mask policies in different states and at businesses and workplaces.
Should I take my mask off? Should I leave it on? It's super confusing.
Trader Joe's and Starbucks have lifted their mask orders, but 22 states still have some sort of mask mandate, meaning in those areas, you'd still have to wear face coverings regardless of retailer policies.
Is it time?
No, for me, not enough people are vaccinated for me to really feel safe, because how do you know if somebody's vaccinated or not when they're not wearing their mask?
Most of the U.S. population, almost 2/3 of Americans, are not yet fully vaccinated. The CDC saying if you are one of those people, you should still wear a mask. Lindsay?
Rena, thank you. And it's another night of bombardment in the city of Gaza and rockets being hurled back toward Israel. Matt Gutman joins us once again. Matt, we heard those calls from President Biden in support of a ceasefire, but is anyone listening?
I think they are, Lindsay, and very quietly we're hearing the clock ticking. I think everybody is aware that the Israeli airstrikes on Gaza have a limited time frame. In the short term, we're told we're not going to see a ceasefire in the next couple of days. In the longer term, let's say 3, 4, 5 days a week, a ceasefire is likely, or at least a de-escalation. And that's certainly what Secretary of State Blinken has been working on over the past couple of days, speaking with his counterparts in the Arab world, chiefly Egypt and Qatar, both of which have ties with Hamas. And that's the key element here, being able to reach out to Hamas and broker something that both sides can agree on. Again, we're not talking about a wide-ranging peace or even a truce. It's really about de-escalation right now until the next round. But again, we've seen some pretty significant airstrikes by Israel on Gaza over the past couple of days, even over the past 24 hours. A senior Islamic Jihad official killed today. Hamas reporting that 5 of its leaders were killed today. That is likely to beget a retaliation of some sort. And Islamic Jihad already has said it will target Tel Aviv if the attacks on homes continue. So far, it's been a pretty quiet night. So maybe this is a good sign. Israeli military officials telling me if Hamas and Islamic Jihad slow the pace of rocket attacks, then we will also slow the pace. So it's a measure for measure type of thing. And maybe we're starting to approach the period of confidence building measures on either side. Again, one major flare-up, a rocket hitting a hotel in Tel Aviv, multiple wounded or killed. That's something that could keep this going for some time. The long answer to your question is we're not quite there yet, but hopefully getting closer to the end here. Lindsay.
Hopefully is right. Matt, thank you so much. Meanwhile, right now, firefighters in Southern California continue to battle a wildfire that's been burning out of control for days. Investigators believe an arson has set the fire that's threatening multi-million-dollar homes in Los Angeles County. ABC's Marcy Gonzalez has the latest from Los Angeles.
Raging flames ravaging these hillsides in and around Pacific Palisades, California. More than 1,300 acres burned so far as firefighters work relentlessly to protect the more than 500 homes under mandatory evacuation orders.
Doing a really good job, but it's very, very scary.
Investigators say a suspect is now under arrest. He's believed to have intentionally set the fire in this area known for its celebrity residents and multi-million-dollar homes, where dry, drought-stricken brush is fueling the flames.
This is very challenging terrain. As you've heard, this is about 75 years since we've had a fire there. Some of the brush is 20 to 30 feet high.
The fire stubbornly spreading despite rain and low humidity, underscoring what experts say is becoming an alarming new norm.
We normally don't have this type of fire, the size of fire, in May. I think we really have to think about brush fires as a year-round challenge.
The Biden administration saying they're preparing resources ahead of what's expected to be another dangerous fire year. Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack tweeting, "We used to call it fire season, but wildland fires now extend throughout the entire year, burning hotter and growing more catastrophic in drier conditions due to climate change."
As for that fire still burning here in Los Angeles County, officials say they expect it to be fully contained within the next few days. And we're still waiting to learn more about that arson suspect who we're told is now being treated for smoke inhalation. Lindsay.
Marcy, thank you. And now to the new allegations against Microsoft founder Bill Gates in the wake of his impending divorce from his wife, Melinda, as reports surfaced that he allegedly engaged in inappropriate conduct at work, including asking several women out for dinner. ABC's chief business and economics correspondent Rebecca Jarvis has the details.
Tonight, Microsoft founder Bill Gates facing new allegations of inappropriate conduct as he and soon-to-be ex-wife Melinda French Gates finalized their multi-billion-dollar divorce. The New York Times and Wall Street Journal reporting Bill Gates allegedly pursued relationships with several employees prior to his wife of 27 years filing for divorce. According to the Journal, Bill reportedly engaged in a years-long sexual relationship with a Microsoft engineer that began in 2000. The employee writing a letter about it, which came to the board's attention in 2019, leading to an investigation. Gates effectively forced from his role on the board in March 2020.
Bill Gates resigned before the investigation was over. That's according to our sources. And we know the full board did not have a formal decision on his resignation, although we do know that some board members had already decided that it wouldn't be suitable for him to say.
A Gates spokesperson telling the Journal there was an affair almost 20 years ago which ended amicably, and Bill's decision to transition off the board was in no way related to this matter. Several sources within Bill's companies telling the New York Times he was known for making clumsy approaches to women in and out of the office.
His public image is as this amazing, upbeat philanthropist. But the people who worked with him closely also knew that he had a reputation for philandering.
A spokesperson for Gates calling the Times report disappointing and full of untruths. Also under scrutiny, Bill's relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The Wall Street Journal reporting Melinda first turned to divorce attorneys as her husband's connection to Epstein became public in 2019. Now, the Daily Beast reporting Epstein allegedly gave Bill advice on ending his marriage when they met between 2011 to 2014. A spokesperson for Mr. Gates telling the Daily Beast the characterization of those meetings is inaccurate, and any claim that Gates spoke of his marriage or Melinda in a disparaging manner is false.
And Lindsay, as it stands tonight, Melinda and Bill Gates will continue to work on their foundation and their charitable giving together. Lindsay?
Rebecca, thank you. And now to Lamar Odom's road to recovery. The basketball star is sober 6 years after a near fatal overdose, and he's crediting a new drug therapy with helping him battle his addiction. ABC's Steve Osunsami talked with him about it.
Lamar Odom.
I feel good. Excited about being here.
The former NBA champion and Olympic medalist has been trying to get sober for the better part of a decade, and he agrees that he cheated death in 2015 after 4 days of heavy drugs in a Las Vegas brothel sent him to a hospital in a coma.
I just want you to close your eyes.
But today he thinks he's found something that helps him beat addiction.
You had never heard of ketamine before this point?
No, I never heard of it. I call it the healthy high, is what I call it.
The healthy high?
Yeah, the healthy high.
Odom, who made headlines for his famous marriage and famous troubles, is now becoming a leading voice in a new therapy that uses the drug called ketamine.
Time for liftoff.
He's being treated with regular visits like this one under medical supervision. They give him small doses of the drug over sessions that last about an hour.
I've been doing it for like 2 years now. I'm scheduled to take another one on Friday.
Ketamine is a pain reliever that was approved by the FDA for human use in the 1970s, and in the 80s it became a club drug. What health officials are discovering now is that in small doses, it may be helpful to people struggling with addictions, PTSD, anxiety, suicidal feelings, and other mental health conditions where the person hasn't seen much success with other treatments.
How many times have you tried to treat what you were dealing with?
Several times. You know, I went to rehab and did some other things, but my ketamine came into my life at the right time. I'm feeling amazing. I'm alive, sober, I'm happy.
To many, this might seem counterproductive, trying to get someone sober by giving them drugs. But the FDA is calling this an off-label use and has approved a ketamine nasal spray to help fight treatment-resistant depression.
Reborn, baby, reborn. You know, I don't wake up looking to do lines, you know what I'm saying? Or waking up in a dark place or feeling unfulfilled. When Kobe passed away, you know, the old Lamar, that'd have been every excuse in the world for me to go get high, doing drugs and even into my mind.
Doctors say that ketamine should be used together with other medications and therapies like meditation. They're still learning about how exactly ketamine affects the brain, but studies so far show that the treatment could possibly help relieve pain from old traumas, like the guilt he still feels from being on the road when he lost his 6-month-old son in 2006.
You know what's crazy? You know, I don't even think I still even sat down and cried about it.
This week, his story with ketamine is being told in a documentary that airs on YouTube, MTV Live, and other social media platforms. It's called Lamar Odom Reborn. He wants black men in particular to pay more care to mental health.
Long term. Is this something that you'll continue, you think, for the rest of your life?
Yeah, I don't think I would stop it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to try to stop it to be great. If I have greatness inside of me, I'm going to try to get it out.
Our thanks to Steve Osunsami for that. And still to come, flaming fraud, allegations against the man who claims to be the creator of Flaming Hot Cheetos. We bring you the reaction from the company.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir.
We have made it through another week together.
America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. It's all about you.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source. Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True Crime 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
Welcome back. We're tracking several international headlines at this hour. A cyclone in Mumbai forced authorities to suspend operations in the city's airport and even shut down some main roads due to flooding. Mumbai's rail system, which is one of the world's busiest, was also impacted due to flooded tracks. The International Olympic Committee is facing mounting pressure as human rights groups are calling for a boycott against the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing. A coalition representing Uyghurs, Tibetans, and residents of Hong Kong are accusing the Chinese government of abuse. A team of scientists are asking the Ukrainian government to return 1,500 bottles of vodka that they claim was made from radioactive apples grown near the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The apples used in the liquor showed slightly elevated radiation levels, but were below the limit considered safe for consumption by Ukrainian law. The alcohol was expected to sell for around $50 in Britain. A former janitor at Frito-Lay who claims that he's the creator of a popular kind of Cheetos is defending himself after serious questions were raised about his claim. It's a story that's brought him money, fame, even a movie deal. ABC's Mona Kosar Abdi has more.
Flamin' Hot Cheetos, deliciously hot, dangerously cheesy.
For more than a decade, the story behind one of America's most popular snacks has been credited to this man.
What would happen if I put chile on a Cheeto?
Richard Montañez has long claimed he's the man who created Flaming Hot Cheetos. He says while working as a janitor for Frito-Lay, a machine broke down, leaving a batch of Cheetos without their seasoning. Montañez says he took some home and decided to spice them up.
I saw people buying chili peppers. I saw people buying spices. I thought, we don't have anything for people who like spices.
After seeing a motivational video from the CEO of Frito-Lay's, Montañez says he worked up the courage to pitch the CEO his idea. But this morning, Frito-Lay calls the story a flaming hot fraud, telling the LA Times, quote, "We value Richard's many contributions to our company, especially his insights into Hispanic consumers, but we do not credit the creation of Flamin' Hot Cheetos or any Flamin' Hot products to him." The LA Times reports an investigation has revealed Flamin' Hot Cheetos were already on the market in some areas before Montañez pitched the idea. And the CEO Montañez claims inspired him did not even work for Frito-Lay when Flamin' Hot Cheetos were developed. But Montañez is standing behind his story.
The best way to destroy a positive message is to destroy the messenger. Never allow that to happen to you. I'm certainly not going to allow it to happen to me.
Montañez has made a business out of telling that story, commanding speaking fees of up to $50,000 per appearance. He stepped down from Frito-Lay in 2019 to focus on motivational speaking. He's also written 2 memoirs, and this summer, a movie based on his life is set to begin filming, with actress Eva Longoria directing.
I guess I don't know what I've been missing. I've never had a flaming hot Cheeto. Our thanks to Mona for that. We turn now to that missing tiger. It has been found. It was last seen on the loose in a Houston neighborhood, then tracked down and moved to a sanctuary. Zoreen Shah has that story.
After a week-long search, India the tiger now safe at the 1,400-acre Cleveland Amory Black Beauty Ranch in North Texas.
Our goal is to provide him the best quality of life for the rest of his life.
India was surrendered Saturday night by Victor Cuevas' wife after police received a tip.
We got him, and he's healthy.
Cuevas was the person last seen with the tiger 1 week ago in Houston, where pet tigers are illegal.
It's someone's pet.
Authorities also say Cuevas is India's owner, even though his lawyer has denied he is. According to police, Cuevas loaded India onto a white truck and took off, arrested the next day for evading authorities. He's now behind bars on a separate 2017 murder charge, which he has pled not guilty to. Tigers are endangered, but according to the Humane Society of the U.S., there are more captive tigers in the U.S., up to an estimated 7,000 than the roughly 3,000 wild tigers left in India. Animal advocates pushing for the passing of the Big Cat Public Safety Act to ban private ownership nationwide.
It is a public health issue. It is also an inhumane situation for these tigers. They are wild animals. They should not be in people's basements.
Our thanks to Zoreen Shah. Our next guest is a former NFL player who has made a new career out of discussing topics that many people avoid. Emmanuel Acho is the host of webcast Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, as well as the host of the 25th season of The Bachelor. He's now out with a new book, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Boy, aimed at discussing systemic racism with a younger audience. Emmanuel, thank you so much for joining us today. The last time you were here, you were discussing your New York Times best-selling book, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. Tell me what inspired you to tailor it now for younger readers.
Yeah, Lindsay, I think that the crux of the issue in our society is really fixing the roots. And I look at it like this. If you wanted to change the trees of this world, you could pluck down the leaves, you could cut down the branches, but it's best that you actually address the root. And if we want to address the root of racism in our society, then it's best we start with the youth. Lindsay, when I was, 12, 13, 14, I often heard, Emmanuel, you don't even talk like you're Black. Emmanuel, you don't even dress like you're Black. Or Lindsay, Emmanuel, you're like an Oreo, Black on the outside, white on the inside. So I grew up with an identity complex. It's not that my white counterparts, my white peers, were intentionally trying to be malicious, but they did not even know the power of their words. So I wanted to write Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Boy to help equip those young white boys and those young white girls, to help give parents the words to say to educate their children if they don't have the words themselves.
Yeah, I must admit I heard those same comments growing up as well. I'd actually like to ask you a question. It was posed on, we did a series recently called Soul of a Nation. There was a question that weekly would be, when was the first time that you realized you were Black? I'd like to pose that question to you.
That's a phenomenal question. Okay, we're going to go deep. There's a difference between color and culture, Lindsay. So I always knew I was Black by skin color. But the dichotomy was, I'm first-generation American. My parents were born and raised in Nigeria. And so although I was Black by skin color, I was cultured Nigerian, listening to Nigerian music, eating Nigerian food, going to Nigerian small groups. Then I'm immersed in white culture from grades 5 through 12 till I graduate. So I knew I was Black by skin color, but I questioned my blackness because to be black at my private school was to be like Nelly circa 2002 without the eye patch, however. And so the first time I realized I was black or fully understood that I was okay being my own version of being black probably wasn't until I got to college.
And so I imagine if you're talking about being in college, that perhaps you were a teenager, what inside this book, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Boy, would have been most useful or instructive to you at that time?
Everything. If I can be honest, but let me be more honest. The book wouldn't have been as instructive for me as it would have been all of my non-black peers. The book would have been instructive for me as a young black boy in the sense of reaffirming my identity, understanding the history of this country, and understanding that by being born black, brown, that I am black and I am brown. I don't have to talk a certain way, dress a certain way, speak in a certain slang to be black.
You write in your book, let me tell you what the movement for racial equality can't afford: white allies being fragile about racial issues. So a lot of people are going to see the book cover, has a black boy on it. You're talking about uncomfortable conversations with black boys. People might not get that. I think that your intended audience is for white people as much as it is for black people.
Yeah, the intended audience is primarily for white people. It's primarily for people who are not of color. See, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Boy is simply saying, allow me to be this black boy to have a conversation with you. If you look at the back of the book, it's actually a picture of me when I was a child, and I have it here. It's actually, that's me when I was maybe 12 or 13. Because now as an adult, I am equipped to have this dialogue. So let me enter into the 13-year-old mindset and communicate this conversation with you.
And lastly, I recently did a story that involved someone who was essentially canceled for using the N-word. So many people responded on social media, basically asking if it's so painful, why do black people use the word, and why don't we all agree not to use this word? You address this in the book, saying no one should attempt to tell black people otherwise. Certainly, this is a hot-button issue for many. Can you explain why you might not agree with the white person who says no one should use the word, period?
I will try to talk about this complex concept very simply. Relationship dictates communication. Lindsay, your significant other would speak to you in a manner that I should never and would never speak to you, in the same manner that my significant other would speak to me in a manner that no one else should speak to me. I would submit that black people have a relationship based upon going through similar things that allows them to communicate in a certain way. With that being said, not all black people think alike. I spoke to Oprah one time at length, and she said she is repulsed by the N-word because that is oftentimes the last word that black boys and black girls heard before they were lynched, beaten, and murdered. So this is not a one-size-fits-all ideology or theory, but very simply, we all understand that in life we can communicate with people differently based upon our relationship. Let's remember, we've lived in a society over the course of hundreds of years where white people in this country, generally speaking, have told black people what they can and cannot do. So if now in 2021, you are again trying to say you cannot use this word, which you all have reframed from the derogatory meaning to actually a term of endearment, it could be very reminiscent of the olden days in which for so long black people were being told what to do.
Emmanuel Acho, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Boy, available now wherever books are sold. We thank you so much for your time, Emmanuel.
Thank you.
And that is our show for tonight. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.